Hello and welcome to another edition of Storytelling on Orchard Street. In the studio with me is Meagan Brothers. She is the author of Debbie Harry Sings in French, a 2009 ALA Best Book for Young Adults and its prequel, and Supergirl Mixtapes. Her third novel, Weird Girl and What's His Name, was named one of Kirkus Review's Best Teen Books of 2015. Her poetry has appeared most recently in New York City, From the Inside, edited by George Wallace, as well as in Persian Sugar, English Tea, the Dada journal Maintenant, and Great Weather for Media's anthologies Before Passing and The Other Side of Violet. And this is going to be the best podcast ever because we have Meagan, right?
We're going to try our darndest.
Yes.
We're going to end all other podcasts.
Right. After this one, people say, well, why are we bothering doing podcasts anymore?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And we did a little test run, and I said Meagan instead of Meagan, and you told me that you were named after a Blood, Sweat, and Tears song.
It's true. It's true. A deep cut. Meagan's Gypsy Eyes.
Right.
Yeah, well, like the fun story about it, I guess, was that I actually got to meet Steve Katz some years later. My good buddy Mike Fornatel was friends with him and knew him, and I was just like telling the story of like that was my name origin. He's like,
okay.
And he's like, Mike's like, oh, I know the guy who wrote that song.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, and we ended up meeting him at this like arts fair because his wife, Steve's wife, is a ceramicist, and he was there like helping sell the ceramics, and so. We went and met him, and I got to have dinner with him. And I mean, like, how often do you get to have dinner with like the guy that like wrote the song?
That's true. That like, you're named after. That's crazy.
Yeah, and he told me it was actually a song about Joan Baez's sister Mimi Farina.
Okay.
But he changed it to Meagan, so it wouldn't be like people wouldn't
too
know.
Obvious. Or
yeah.
Too, right.
And which was funny because then, like, in further weird coincidence, when I was a very little kid, my nickname was Mimi. That's what my mom called me.
Wow.
She had no idea, but anyway, collective unconscious. I don't know what that is.
Were your parents either of them musicians or just music lovers?
My mom, they were both music lovers, and my mom was a singer. She sang like kind of choral like music and sort of played guitar, and my dad apparently played bass in a Rolling Stones cover band in Gadsden, Alabama in the late 60s called Satan's Children.
Satan's Children.
If you can imagine Gadsden, Alabama.
So it was like a dark heavy metal version of the Stones?
I wish that some kind of tape survived. Like I would love to hear some Satan's Children, whatever they were up to.
Maybe they should have a reunion.
I know. Well, sadly my dad's passed away. But
sorry.
But yeah, like if there's anybody out there who has some old reel-to-reel of Satan's Children or anything, please contact me. I would love to hear it. But
that's crazy.
Yeah. But
see, now we wouldn't have had this conversation if I didn't mispronounce your name.
Exactly.
Imagine that.
It's a door opener.
Right.
It really is. It's a conversation starter. But I've only met like 2 other people that ever knew that song, and one was my friend Mike, who's like a musician that probably some people listening to this podcast know. And the other was just this random guy who was like a salesman coming through an office where I was working a temp job, and he was like, he's like, oh, Meagan's Gypsy Eyes, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, all right. And I was just like, what? Like some random guy from like Indianapolis or whatever. Just was like a big Blood, Sweat, and Tears fan.
Well, I'm going to go on Spotify later and check it out, see if I can listen to it.
It's not a bad tune.
I was going to say, is it a good? You like the song?
It's a little depressing though. It's like there's like a line that's like, "Death that haunts her eyes will last forever," or something like that.
That's pretty intense.
Like, geez, Mom, what were you going through there? That's pretty heavy.
It is really heavy.
Yeah. Well,
so you're a native Carolinian? Is it Carolinian or Carolinian?
Well, I don't know. I always kind of make up that word because
it's Carolina, but
Yeah, I had like the odd situation of like we were from North Carolina, all my mom's family for generations back, North Carolina, living in North Carolina, but then I just popped out of the womb in South Carolina. But then was swiftly whisked back over the border to North Carolina.
Technically born in South Carolina.
I'm technically a South Carolinian, I guess, but then I grew up in North Carolina, but then we moved to Atlanta, but then we moved back to South Carolina.
Well, I think it's like if you drop something on the floor, you have 30 seconds to eat it.
I like that. It's like the 5-second rule of babies. It's like,
So how long exactly was it? Because there is a minimum and a maximum.
Well, I guess a few days of
I don't know.
time.
You might be a South Carolinian. Then.
Well, I know, and that's the thing.
A few days. If it was a few hours or a day or two, maybe.
Well, what's funny is then like we came full circle, and I ended up going to high school across the street from the hospital where I was born.
Oh.
So I guess maybe I'm a South Carolinian. I don't know.
So your family lives on the border?
No, well, just kind of like over. Well, most of them are in Spartanburg now. My mom and my grandma are there, and but like my grandma's side of the family is all still in North Carolina. My dad's side of the family is mostly in Alabama.
Is this like the east or southeast? Or
kind of the western part of the country,
okay.
like in the mountains, like Rutherford County,
okay.
Ellenboro, if anybody knows.
Yeah, I'm not that familiar. I went to Wilmington about 6 years ago, I think, to visit my brother and wife. They live there. Yeah.
That's more like coastal.
Yeah,
but it's beautiful coast. Yeah.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's such a diverse region.
Right.
So yeah, we were more in the mountains, but yeah, and then Spartanburg's kind of what they call the upstate. So, yeah, the Piedmont, foot of the mountains, as they say, from the French.
Wow.
But
see, we're learning geography, and we're learning. We're learning so much. We're learning about blood, sweat, and tears. And
forget poetry. We're just gonna start talking about like vinegar-based barbecue for like the rest of the.
Well, usually I ask people like when did they start writing, or but I see that you were like a teen and you already had you're already published.
Oh, well, those books came later, but they are young adult books.
Right.
But I wrote them when I was older.
I get it.
Yeah.
All right.
My immaturity just continued.
I see.
No, they're books like for teenagers, but I was writing as a teen and as a very young person. I was like kind of precocious in that way a little bit, but yeah, I didn't really get into poetry initially. I was trying to think about this because I had from listening to past episodes of this podcast.
Right, I do like to ask it. I'm just curious. Yeah. Because for me, it was like really late in life.
Yeah, and I thought I hated poetry because like
a lot of people say that.
I know.
I've had other guests say that too.
When I initially my initial exposure to it, and actually like initially I was reading like Shel Silverstein and stuff. So I mean I didn't think of that, like Light in the Attic and. I don't know if you ever read those books, like Where the Sidewalk Ends. Like that was. I'm not a poem memorizer, but the only poem I can recite from memory is Shel Silverstein's.
Wow.
There's too many kids in this tub. There's too many elbows to scrub. I just washed a behind that I'm sure wasn't mine. There's too many kids in this tub. Just
I like
genius.
That is really good.
It's so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I learned that when I was like 7 or something.
That's funny. And it stuck with you all these years?
I mean, when there's something as good as that, it's almost like Ramones-like, and it's perfect. Like, now I guess I have to tell them that I got no cerebellum, kind of perfection.
We used to sing songs in elementary school, and there's one that's stuck in my head all these years, and it's such a dumb song.
Oh my gosh.
I am Dr. Eisenbar, Billy, Billy, Bick, boom, boom. People say I'm very smart, Billy, Billy, Bick, boom, boom. I make my patients well again. I don't know if it's Willie or Billy, Bick, boom, 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 boom. I don't know. It's such a dumb song, but I think about that all the time.
It's amazing that like I have a niece who's like about 1.5, and when we visited one time, there was a song that my sister-in-law was singing to her, and it was on some baby compilation. It was so catchy, and I was like, oh my god! Like after hearing it twice, it's like, well, this song is stuck in my head for the whole week, and yeah, it's about like. Yeah, well, now I can't remember it, but, but yeah, they make these kids' songs so dumb and catchy, and it's kind of great.
Yeah.
So I don't know, geniuses, insidious geniuses.
Yes, but that's the point, right?
Exactly, right. Something that sticks with you.
So we talked a lot about. Well, I first saw you at Otto's Shrunken Head.
Otto's,
you were a feature.
Yep.
For Matthew Eupert's
Neuronautic. Yeah.
Sometimes it sticks in my head.
Yeah. I always want to call it neuromatic.
Right.
Like no, it's neuronautic.
Yeah. I gotta ask him what the origins of that is. Do you know? Is
don't.
It the name?
I don't. I always assumed it was kind of like a swimmer into the mind or something. Like nautic sounds like kind of
it does,
but
right?
then like neuro is
okay.
So I don't know if that's he might.
And I immediately liked I liked your poetry and your deliverance and. I like your poetry has also there's like a little bit of kind of like dark humor in it to some degree, right? Or just it's witty, or I don't know if I'm saying the right words, but I just really liked. And then we talked, and that made me feel like extra that it would be fun to have you on. We talked a lot about music and stuff. So
yeah, I know. I was thinking, I was like, I'm gonna have to struggle to not have this be just like a whole like podcast of the two of us talking about music. Because I know we were just like ping ponging back and forth.
I mean, it's storytelling, so it's not strictly just poetry. I mean, you can tell stories in music, and music has I don't know about you, but there's certain music that I hear from different times in my life, especially from when I was just starting to enjoy music as a kid. It has a different feel to it.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Just
different feeling when I hear it.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like the story of your life, you know?
Yeah, well, I think there's some study, isn't there, that like the music that you hear as a teenager because of your raging hormones or whatever, like it imprints more deeply or something. But
right, but even stuff earlier than that has that feeling to me in a different way.
Oh, totally.
Right.
Yeah.
So you didn't love poetry at first,
no,
but then,
well,
but you wrote.
Well, I had a teacher that kind of put me off of it, which is kind of always the way. You know?
Is it because they were too strict and rigid about it, or?
Yeah, that was part of it. But it was like weirdly...
Because that's what I always felt, it was only that, you know.
Yeah, you know, I always had this thing of like, I don't know. It was just like if an adult like told me something, and as a kid I could see that it was a dumb rule.
Right.
I just felt like really like the sense of injustice was just galling, and I felt like it was really dumb. And so I had this teacher in 4th grade. We did like a little poetry unit, and then we were supposed to write a poem. And I wrote, you know, what I thought was like a good poem. And I kept showing it to her, and she kept saying, "That's not a poem. That's not a poem." And she just like wouldn't even really look at it. Yeah,
because how's that going to, you know, make you feel like writing again?
I know. And I was like, you know, even at the time, I was like, well, first of all, I'm 10. So like,
I know, right? What did you expect? Yeah.
Let's just start from that point. Like, I'm not exactly going to like jump out of the gates and be, you know, Coleridge or whatever. So like,
what was the poem about? Do you remember?
Oh God, I cannot remember what it was about. I just remember that I kept taking it back to the teacher and trying to figure out what I was doing wrong.
Right.
And like I kept going back to my desk and like looking at the samples that we were reading and like, what am I doing wrong?
Right.
And she said, it's not a poem because it doesn't indent. Like the first line doesn't indent and it should be indented, which is like I've never heard that from anybody else. And I was just like, what? And like even at the time, I just remember looking at her and thinking like, that's so friggin' stupid.
Right. Is it possible she just didn't know that much about poetry?
That is
your
possible.
Poem was probably the greatest poem ever written.
Well, I doubt it, but I mean, it was like a weird, and then later on though, it was the structure thing. So yeah, with her, I don't know if she was just trying to give me a hard time or if like, I don't know, it was so straight. I still remember it though. I was like, why does it need to indent? Like for years afterwards, like poetry's so stupid. Like you have to indent the lines in some stupid way. Like it's so dumb. Like why would anybody ever write a poem?
Right.
But then later in high school, I had a teacher that was very, you know, because it was actually a great poetry education. We had this like 3-inch thick book of like every poem ever written.
Wow.
But I mean, it was a great like, you know, it was like onion skin, like it was a real like Bible of poetry. I still have it in my mom's house. It was really great. Right. But, you know, but looking back, like to start with the early stuff, I think for young people sometimes to be like, let's start with sonnets and you know, and all that stuff. It's I mean, it's great. I think you need to have that sense of like, this is the form, you know, and here's how it like evolved from the Highwayman or whatever. Right. But to be like 16 and it's like, go home and write a sonnet. And so like, you know, we were like, now it's like I'm 16, I'm trying to write a sonnet. And I remember like really trying to really work hard to make it fit with the iams and all the rules and stuff. And then I remember to this day, my teacher gave me a C on it, the infamous Dr. Brown. If I have any friends listening at home,
the
so
name
they can,
stuck
like,
because
they can
you got
pale,
a C.
Yeah. they can all like, you know, shudder if any of my high school compatriots are listening to this. But he was great though, actually, because he was a total grammar technician, and I've any like grasp of grammar that I have now, I totally owe to this guy because he was just so nerdy about it. But the poetry thing, he gave me a C on the sonnet, and he said it was hackneyed and trite.
Wow.
I still remember that, hackneyed and trite. And I was like,
say that to a 16-year-old?
I know, and I was like, again, it's like I'm 16.
These people try too hard.
I know, it's like, what do I have to write about? I've got like no life experience. I wrote about like summer.
So crazy.
I know, I wrote like a sonnet about summer vacation. That one I do remember what it was about, and it was like,
what a way to turn people off. This is crazy.
Well, I know.
It's amazing you kept going.
I know. In the face of, you know, everybody is, you know, or maybe it was a sign. I shouldn't I should quit while I'm ahead. Right. But I know, like, that was another time when my, you know, teenage BS detector kind of kicked in, and I was like, you know, like, I did all the things with the meter and the rhyme and the stuff that I was supposed to. Like, who cares what it's about, right?
Did you further study poetry in, like, did you go to college, and did you study poetry at all in college?
I did go to college. I did not study poetry. I studied screenwriting. But I did take some poetry classes, like, as an elective, just because I liked it. I was into it. By that point,
early on, like, this part of your life, you wrote your poetry because you wanted to, but you didn't see yourself as you were going to be a poet.
Well, I did. So going back to the sonnet. But what was funny is around that time of the sonnet, the infamous sonnet incident, this is like becoming momentous. Right. I had started like writing little, because I was writing short stories, and I went to like, there was like a writer's camp in town that was really great, like during the summer at the community college, like for 5th and 6th graders. So I got dropped off there every day for a couple of weeks and got to like write little short stories and things. So I knew writing was an interest from really early on.
Right.
And I was kind of, I kind of had that thing when I was in high school of like, kind of, you ever seen that movie Rushmore?
Yeah.
The Wes Anderson movie.
Right.
I kind of had that thing of like, you know, I was a kid who was like completely like, you know, failing geometry, sort of like a C- student, like, but you know, going home and working on my novel.
Right.
Like,
Right.
so
Sure.
This sort of
right.
weird level.
So you had your
of like,
passion, and the other things
like,
were
failing and yet being very precocious.
Right.
And which looking back on it, of course, is just kind of hilarious to me. But sweet and effortful. You know, it's like I was really serious about it. And but as a sideline to that, I had a little notebook, and I started carrying it with me at some point, like when I was around 14, and just writing like little snippets of words that would come to me, and like words that I liked, or phrases that I would overhear, things like that. And I realized like kind of phrases were starting to just sort of come to me, and or little images would start to kind of construct themselves, or things like that. And around when I was maybe 15 or 16, I wrote what I was like my first real poem. And it was such a like big experience.
Was this for a project? I was class assignment, or just on your own?
It was just on my own.
Okay.
It was just like in my little teenage bedroom.
Right.
And it's funny because
what posters were on the wall?
I can tell you what posters were on the wall. I had a big poster of every Beatles album cover.
Wow,
it was a really cool
like
poster. That was like my
Right.
favorite poster.
Okay.
And it was every Beatles album cover, like in
Cool.
in like a grid, and like on
the American or the British version.
That's the thing. I think it was the American versions, and on the
because they're different. I have a box set of Beatles British releases.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I think it was all the American versions,
okay.
And because I don't think it had something else by the Beatles, and I think that wasn't, or wait, was that American? Maybe it was the British releases. Anyway. Now I got to go back and try to find it. But at any rate, it was a really cool. It was all the Beatles, and it was like all their songs were listed on the side, and I would just like look up at it and like look at all the song titles. And
that's great.
Yeah, and then a little after that, that was like around the time I was going through my heavy like film girl phase. So I had like a giant. One of my friends gave me this huge poster of Quentin Tarantino.
Oh, okay.
I kind of wish I still had that too. He was wearing like this like Elvis in Vegas kind of like glittery like jacket and just doing this like really cool pose, like as cool as Quentin Tarantino has ever looked. And it was just said like Tarantino or something on it. It wasn't even for one of his movies. It was just this massive.
Wow.
And then I also had my guy Martin Scorsese. I loved Scorsese, and
Wait,
just
Scorsese also, not any of the movies or
I did love the movies. It sounds insane to go back and be like this teenage girl from like the suburbs in South Carolina. It's like, oh, Marty. Like I just thought his movies were so cool, and he just seemed so cool. And like I guess because it was so like New York and everything was like so foreign to me. So like watching like Taxi Driver was just so, like.
So that was going to be one of my questions. Like, how did you get to New York, or how did you get here? But we have to hear one of your poems.
Oh gosh, okay, well.
Because you know what, we're almost we're already 18 minutes into the show.
Okay, I gotta read fast.
No, don't. Okay. Yeah, but I want to make sure we get some of your poetry in here too.
Okay, well we'll do that.
Because we could chat away forever.
Well, it's funny. So now I guess I'll segue from like the Carolinas to like then we'll go into New York. So I'll read like this is a poem I wrote when I was home last year.
Okay.
About like being at home, and it's called Wheel of Fortune.
Oh, okay.
When I was little, I sat in this green naugahyde swivel chair in my grandparents' kitchen while my grandmother made salmon patties and hominy, cut tomato slices red as suns. The TV on the hutch played Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, the beeps and blurts of the letterboard lighting up, questions to the answers filling the screen as the salmon sizzled in Wesson oil. Now I'm 44, standing on my mother's back porch. The hawk that's been circling lands on a low branch. It's June. There are still at least 2 good hours of daylight, and isn't it something that I can go inside and sit in the green naugahyde swivel chair, and my grandmother is there, cooking salmon patties. I slice tomatoes red as suns, and the Wheel of Fortune still turns, as it ever was. Back to the hunt, the hawk ascends with a cry. How lucky am I, the wheel turning, and all this bounty I still have.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Is your grandmother a good cook?
She's a very good cook.
The salmon patty sounds good with it. Was it like nice juicy tomato?
Yeah, gosh, man, those summertime tomatoes.
And what was it on a bun or bread?
No, I think that she just usually makes the salmon patties, and then we have like a couple of sides there.
Yeah, not a sandwich, it's just a patty.
But a tomato sandwich, I mean, that's the best.
Yes.
Like just a good tomato, like right on.
Yeah. Mayo?
Yeah, I am not a mayo person.
No, okay.
You know what I like to do is like a little thin slice of cheese instead of the mayo, like a little slice of Swiss or like Havarti, something like a nice mild. Okay, that's my tip.
I didn't eat a big lunch. Now you're making me too hungry.
Now you're gonna get a tomato.
Yes, I'm gonna do that. The big tomato sandwiches are a big deal in the South. But isn't there a dressing that they use? I'm trying to think of the name of it. The special. It's like a mayonnaise kind of dressing, but it's something. All right, I can't think of it.
I don't know. I know usually for us, like the tomato sandwich is just like tomato, mayonnaise on bread.
Right.
The end.
Right. Because when you get it has to be white bread, no like whole grain, you know.
Yeah. I mean, again, really. Like I like to have like a nice little something. You know, you get like a nice sourdough or something.
Right. Okay. So how did you get to? But I love the scene, man. So it seems like going home is a good thing for you because some people, you know. Families could be a tough thing.
Yeah, so, no. I mean, I definitely had that rebellious thing when I was a kid of like, I don't want to come back to this podunk town and kind of thing. But you know, I mean, I just appreciate it so much now, and I appreciate that like I could still go visit my mom and my grandma and so many of my friends that I know now are losing their parents and grandparents and stuff like that. And I know like how super fortunate I am, and I've been like even more in the last 10 years or so. I've just been like so appreciative of the fact that I'm able to go home and see them, and I wish I could go more.
So how long have you been in New York City, and what made you first move here?
Gosh, what made me? I probably, I moved here in 2000, and right after graduation from film school, because I had some opportunity, or a couple of things that seemed like they could be job opportunities that ended up not panning out, but it just seemed like the best option.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to go into film, it's like New York, it's LA,
it's like it's here or LA,
Toronto,
pretty much. Yeah, like there's a handful of places, and if you're more of a technician, I think you can go. Like, or like Atlanta's got a lot of.
Was that what you were looking to do?
Now.
The technical side, or
no, writing was really the thing.
I see, screenwriting.
So and I also thought like, well, I could work on crews because I was pretty active in that. Like when I was a student, I was working on people's crews and stuff, but it just ended up not panning out, and ended up moving to New Jersey in like I think 2003, and then moved back here in 2010. So I was living on the Jersey Shore for what was that, like 7 years, something like that. And
what were you doing down there?
I kind of moved down. I moved down to Asbury Park. I had some friends there. Actually, a friend of mine, Trina Scordo, who was a great poet, and I mean probably still is a great poet. Sadly, we're not in touch right now, but she was somebody that I met through the Cornelia Street readings, the Pink Pony readings that I mentioned to you. And we ended up. I went down there to visit her because she got a house down there, and it just had such a great vibe in the early aughts. It was like what I wanted New York to be, and that like it was how I imagined New York like in the 70s. Like it was kind of gritty and not quite gentrified again yet, but it was like very like there were starting to be like galleries and stuff popping up. And you could just,
I went to Asbury Park in the 70s, mid 70s, with high school friends right after we graduated to hang out, and we saw Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes.
Yeah, it's a classic Jersey Shore band.
Yep, really.
Yeah, so I went down there really because it was just, I think I had that sort of revelation of like when 9/11 happened, I kind of went, I don't want, like at that time I had a job in a sort of marketing job, like a market research, like reading surveys, kind of just a workaday job, and I just kind of had this revelation of like I don't want to die in a cubicle, kind of thing, and started going down to Asbury, and it was just such a good vibe. I was like, man, this is like the perfect, like this is what I want, like to just live in like this artistic kind of enclave. And me and Trina ended up starting a band, and so I was doing the music thing for quite a while down there.
What are you doing in a band?
Well, in that band, I played guitar, which seems like a crazy thing to say because I was not really a guitar player. It was very learn on the job kind of. Because I know you're a drummer, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and it was wild though because we had a pretty wild ride in terms of like getting to play a lot of gigs and like travel and. I mean,
what was the name of the band?
We were called the Steel Pier Sinners.
Okay.
And it was very Jersey Shore,
Right,
very
sure.
like bar band punk.
Covers or originals?
Mostly originals.
Okay.
Trina was very like prolific and in very like Springsteeniana.
She sang
kind
and,
of she sang and like wrote like really rich lyrics
Right.
and stuff. And I got to have my little Keith moment and do a couple of my songs every once in a while. but I was writing a lot of stuff, but it didn't really fit in the band. That
Right.
At that point, I was writing a lot of like songs that were really long.
And it was basically like
and
rock
really,
band lineup, like bass drums, two guitars,
yeah,
kind of thing.
two guitars, bass drums.
Yeah.
That was it. Pretty straightforward, Ramalama, garage rock kind of
Nice.
stuff. But it was cool because like we got to do this little Stevens underground garage battle of the
wow.
bands thing.
That's fun.
Like, that was really fun. And
Did you win?
we did actually.
Oh,
well,
wow.
we won the Asbury Park.
You didn't write that on your
yeah.
file that you were that you won a battle of the bands.
I didn't think it would come up. It was
Wow,
so.
I'm glad it did.
I know, it was so funny that there was such an insane, and like the guest judge was Pete Best, the Beatles
Really?
original drummer.
Get the hell out of here.
Yeah. And
Was Steve Van Zandt there?
he wasn't at that one, but we got to, being the Asbury winners, we got to come and play at Irving Plaza with all the other regional winners, and he apparently was there for that. And that one we didn't win, but well, I can tell you the gossip, the backstage scuttlebutt that I heard because
I love hearing scuttlebutt.
Yeah, some scuttlebutt.
And I don't remember the last time I heard somebody use that word, but thank you.
You're welcome. Bringing the 1800s back to you. So this is Orchard Street.
It was a
It's like
bunch of
an old-
hooligans
yeah, it's
getting involved in a scuttlebutt.
A fisticuffs.
I love the word. And that's
Yes,
another
a
good.
fisticuffs
That's a
erupted,
good word.
yeah.
They should be used. Hooligans is a great word.
We're down
Let's
here
go
on
to
the.
scuttle-
This
yeah.
is the Lower East Side.
Bring
This
them
is-
back.
This is the heat of like.
This is where some of those words were probably invented.
Probably hooligans and scofflaws, and
Yeah.
this is the gangs
Yeah.
of New York
Right.
milieu. So, so the scuttlebutt from backstage was that there was us and another band that had girl guitar players, and one of the judges at the big one was MTV's Kurt Loder.
Okay.
And he did not like girl guitar players.
Oh, that stinks.
Yeah, he thought that
Well, he's a jerk anyway.
Yeah, he thought that both of us really sucked. Yeah,
Right.
and so apparently,
Male chauvinist pig.
I am spilling the tea on Kurt Loder. I'm
Right.
sorry, y'all, but
No, it needs to be done. It's about time. It's about time he's been taken down. Well, a little late. We should have come down a long time ago.
all the media, like our Jan Winter,
Right.
Kurt Loder, just
Right,
take
I
them all
know.
down,
Yep,
just
yep.
all of them.
You know, my friend wrote the book Sticky Fingers. That is Joe Hagen.
Oh, no kidding. Okay,
I
interesting.
DJ'd his wedding, but have you
wow.
heard it? Because that's and Joe just wrote an article in Vanity Fair about John Winter about this whole thing.
Yeah, wow. No,
Anyway.
I actually, no, I haven't read that book. When you first said it, I thought I had, but I don't know that I have.
It's about the
actually
history of Rolling Stone, I wound up not having a good relationship with Jan Winter. He didn't like the way he was portrayed in the book, but the true light is coming out now. You know?
I mean, it is. I almost feel bad for some of those guys, but then again, I don't. It's
no,
like,
yeah.
It's like you really dig your own grave. And that article, like for those of you who aren't aware, recently Jan Winter, to catch you up, was interviewed by the New York Times and just hung himself with his own rope.
Right.
And the
Basically
journalist,
saying that women
and people,
and African American they didn't have the same level
of intelligence
or
whatever
articulate.
it was.
Right,
I know, it's
right.
like say that
instead of just saying I didn't interview some of those, because they mentioned some of the greats, and instead of just being smart and saying, well, they weren't in my network really, and I just really was interviewing people I'm comfortable. Like he could have said something like that.
Yeah, he could have said, well, these are my friends that I sat down with, the casual conversations or something.
Maybe I overlooked. I should have some people. Oh my God.
That's for the next book or whatever. Right. But oh my gosh, it was just amazing to like. I was like, am I reading this with my own eyeballs?
I know,
the journalist even said to him, "Would you like to rephrase that?"
Wow,
and Jan Winter's like, so anyway, what I was saying is like black people are inarticulate. It's like, oh my God, man. Oh, so yeah, good riddance, because you know what, it is like that rockist attitude, like for way too long, it just pervades, and the whole Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing, like as a fan, it's galling, and that's definitely like, as I've gotten older, I've realized like the blind spots that I've had towards music, because like major media just didn't cover certain people, and then you realize like, oh, like here's this person who just like produced, I mean, so it's crazy. Like just and a lot of it is like black music, women, just it's kind of So I'm myself like I'm trying to like get rid of all that like rockist stuff where you just it's like, well, these 8 bands are the godhead, and anybody else is just sort of trailing behind.
Right. Well, it's been like that, and I mean it still is. I think they talk about the greatest drummer or the greatest guitarist. It's always rock drummers.
Yeah.
You know, and men, and you know.
But even like in the soul, where it's like it's never Bernard Purdie. It's always just like I mean.
Oh my God, Bernard Purdie! I can't believe you mentioned him.
I mean. He
did Aretha's Rocksteady.
I know, which is like
that drum fill is the greatest ever. That little solo he takes in that.
I know, and it's like no disrespect to like Keith Moon or whoever, but it's like those lists are just predictably.
Right, and they're never you never hear the jazz musicians there, like you know Max Roach wasn't a great drummer. I mean,
yeah, I know it's galling.
So let's read another poem. Because I could chat with you all day, but I want to make sure your poetry gets in the podcast.
Oh gosh, well, you know.
So pick
I
something.
know we've wasted too much time on Jan Wenner, but
I know.
So I guess in the scheme of coming to New York and coming back to New York and like working in New York and stuff. So this one is hot off the presses. It's still even in my handwriting. Right. I wrote it this week.
I can smell the ink from here.
I know, it's the waft of
I think I'm getting a little high from it.
Yeah, the Bic fumes.
Did you mimeograph it?
I wish. Yeah, it was like all nice and purple.
Right.
I actually had some downtime on one of my jobs this week, and I wrote this. It's kind of, and weirdly.
Do we want to talk about your job? I mean, like, cause like, so you don't make your living from film or writing or. No.
Okay.
Read the poem then.
Okay. I like the way you think.
Yes.
So, but it is like, because I mean, talking about influences in college, I was reading like Frank O'Hara is a big one for me, and also a New York guy. And it's funny because I think of his "I do this, I do that" kind of poems a lot with like what I write. Even if it's not like about me, it's just like this is sort of what I witnessed or whatever. And but I was at work in this downtime. I was reading this review of like Richard Hell has a new book, and it's called "What Just Happened." And there's no like punctuation, and there's talking about is it a question or is it a statement? And so I thought, well, that's like a good twist on the "I do this, I do that" poem. It's like what just happened. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna write a "What just happened" poem. So this is
I like that.
This was my commute. This is just like a poem about my like of a Tuesday. Anyway. It's called Now New York. Now New York means something again, crossing the creaking bridge by train some days after the floods. I'm bleached in summer like haze. The gauze of morning softens the squint of glass and steel on the island behind me. Over the river, the bell-like curve of the Brooklyn Bridge, Lady Lib waving from her postcard stance. Am I improving? I'm working again. Part of the vein, one of the strange chattering termites eating up time. Out we go and come back again, nibbling away. Take home a little piece, mouthfuls of nothing that jingle like coins. I'm part of something, pretending to be fearless, pretending this world is yours applies to me. Huh, does it? I'm underground again, newsprint on my hands, rejecting everything. I want to leave, but I can't. Reject that. I want to stay, but I can't. Reject that too. Look, it's October. It feels like summer, but it's later than you think. Enjoy yourself or something. You'll be crossing the bridge at sunset soon, and then at night, coming back into the twinkling lights, Ornament City. Now New York means something again. Sit down with a pencil and paper, count the coins that fall out of your mouth, add them up, try and figure it out. Write this down. Does it mean something? Anything? How about now? How about now?
Yes, it does mean something. It surely does.
Well, thank you.
Cool.
So, yeah, it's just, that's like the eternal thing of like, I'm working, but what am I working on? What am I working at? Where's my work? Where's my capital W work? What's my lower W work doing? Like, that's always the...
Yeah, sure. I get it.
The thing.
But you have your art.
You got, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's poetry is very sustaining, and it has been, and that's what I appreciate about New York. When I first moved here, nothing was really happening. I remember I had a teacher in college who, a screenwriting teacher, who told us, or gave us like a food for thought thing, and said, "What are you going to do for your art every single day?" Because he said, "You're not always going to be successful. You're not always going to be working on a script, doing a movie. Like that's just the nature of the business. You're just going to have fallow times. And so what can you do for yourself to feel like you're furthering your art every single day?" And I've always thought about that. Like, even if you can't work every single day. Like sometimes that's just not a reality with the rest of the real world. You gotta get the laundry done,
sure.
you know.
Yeah.
But it was like, that's what the poetry readings here for me that I found. I didn't ever want to read poetry, even though I was writing it for quite some years and sort of into high school, into college. But coming here and getting involved in the readings, it gave me something like every week, tangible, like a place to go, instant feedback.
Right.
As being surrounded by other poets, other artists, like it was just so fulfilling to be able to just go, do it, say it, have it exist in its little space of time, and then it's over, and then you all go and have dinner. You know, it's like just
yeah. I mean, what's great. I mean, so some people might not like both parts of it. I guess because I was in a band all those years, but as a drummer, typically would be doing somebody else's vision. And it was in the back. Yeah. Except I was in a band called Voodoo Martini, and I was kind of up front because I played stand-up and percussion and was almost the lead instrument. Cool. But generally speaking, it's still somebody else's vision. And I don't know, I think I write pretty well. You know, I don't know if I call myself a poet, but I write, and I write what's in me and from my life, and I try to tell a story.
I would call you a poet.
Oh, thank you.
I've heard your poems. So
okay.
You are officially, I hereby dub thee a poet.
Well, you know, I didn't do what you got, a lot of the people that I have had on the show. I mean, you know, you really studied it at different parts of your life. I mean, so I didn't have that part of it, you know.
Yes and
so I'm just kind of writing how I feel and think.
But I think that's the great thing, and that's something that, like, is important for everybody. Like, you don't have to have studied it in college or have a teacher that made you, you know, crammed a bunch of sonnets down your throat or whatever. Like, you can pick it up right now. Like, you just turn off this podcast and, like, you know, sit down and write something and just see what comes out. And I mean, that's not always a great way to work, but like that's the starting point, is like, you know, sit with yourself, feel, you know, and read some poems.
And then
like
develop a style. I feel like I've developed a style.
Yeah.
But then there's the writing part, and that's very personal.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And then there's the reading part, and actually the reading part can be personal too. It depends, especially the poem. Sometimes I will read certain poems that strike a chord for me, and I get almost like this really intense emotional thing, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, but as a performer, I love being on the stage, and it's my thing now. It's my, you know, ideas and my creativity, and I love it. I love going to the readings and doing features. Yeah. I'm actually, I think we're going to hopefully air this. We're doing this Saturday, October 7th, and hopefully it'll go up tomorrow or Monday. Monday the 9th, I'm going to be back here for Wayne Crawl's. Have you ever done his Wayne Crawl?
No, is that here at this?
You should look into it. He would like you, and it's right here. You've been here before, right?
Yeah.
You know where there's like there's like right directly behind us. There's the steps.
Yeah.
That's where the audience sits.
Cool.
It's cool because it's a little different than going to a restaurant or bar. Yeah. You know, which is fine also. But it takes that component, the noise from the bar and the drinking and all that, and it's really just really easier to really pay attention to the writers, or for you to read and project to the audience. So you should meet Wayne. So I'm going to be doing Wayne's thing, cool. And my friend Fred is playing guitar. Oh, nice. It's going to be music and poetry for me, and I'm doing it with. Well, there's 3 other poets. One of them who I don't know, but I'm doing it with Linda Kleinbub and Philip Giambri. And they were, I met Wayne Crawl here, seeing a friend of mine that I was in that band with, Voodoo Martini, reading here. And that's how I found out about the podcast studio. But then I gave Wayne a book, and he booked me to do a feature. And it was early on for the bookstore and for Wayne, you know. But I met Philip and Linda, which I'm really thankful for, because they opened other doors for me to other places. So, nice. But it's a good place. You should try to hook up with Wayne.
Yeah. I should try if I can make it off work in time.
Yeah. So it's at 6 o'clock. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it is another nice place to do features, because I think it's a little. There's no open mic. It's just features.
Yeah. The bar thing does get kind of old sometimes.
Well, I mean, I like it too. I mean, because there is a social component to this too, and you know, for me, that's also good. Yeah. It's a little harder later in life to make friends. You know, it's like easier when you're younger.
Oh my gosh!
So this is another way to meet people and get, you know,
totally.
get out of yourself a little bit, especially after the pandemic. I did my first reading right before the pandemic.
Oh my gosh!
And the guy said, "Oh, you should come back." It, you know, went really well. It was an open mic, and then the pandemic, everything shut down.
Yeah.
So I didn't, you know, do readings. You know, some people did Zoom readings. I didn't do that. I need the in-person thing.
The Zoom readings were weird. I did a couple of those, and it was just, that thing of like, well, I'm just sitting here in my house, and it's very quiet, and I could see people doing like the poetry snaps, like in their little screens, but it was just weird. I don't know. I never got used to it. But it was nice to, you know, be able to hear somebody who's in Sweden or whatever that normally wouldn't make it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good side to it, too.
Yeah.
That is a good...
Ups and downs.
Right.
But there is something...
good component of it.
Yeah, there's something really magical about being in that room and just... like with people,
right?
And it's just it can be heavy. It can be like really emotional,
right? I get intense.
Yeah.
And especially if I'm doing a feature, I'll think about it all day. But I like that when I have a gig with the drums too.
Yeah.
I think about it all day. I got to do this. I got to do that.
Yeah.
Do I remember this song? Do I remember this poem? You know, whatever. I think about all the details because I'm a planner. But I get obsessive about it, you know, even to the point where am I going to park the car if I'm driving? It's you know, and then you get up and you do it, and I get really intense about it. And I don't know about you, but sometimes, especially if it's a feature, I'm thinking so much about what I got to do. I find it hard to soak in what other people are doing, you know.
Yeah. Sometimes the people that go before me during a feature, it's like I'm not fully absorbing like everything that they're saying because like I'm kind of in the back of my mind. I'm sort of assessing, and I'm also like going like, okay, like this is sort of changing the vibe in the room, and am I going to change what I'm reading because of it? And I mean, sometimes you get lucky and like follow somebody at an open who's like really like brings the room down, and then you can bring it up.
Sure.
But then, like sometimes
it's good to think of it that way. Maybe you have to you change what you're going to read for that. So
well, that's why I bring my little stack.
Right. So there's one more thing I want to talk to you about, at least. But we're going through the show really quick. I want to read one of mine.
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
Since I wasn't sure what I was going to read, but I wrote this recently, and it's kind of a city thing. So since you brought up the city images of the city, I'm going to read this one. It's called Heartless Metropolis. He died very young. It didn't matter to many, but it did to me. I was there when he fell, when the lights were dim and the mood shattered. I was there when he was carted away in an ambulance post-overdose, trying to find another plane in his lonely life. I often walked the streets looking for him, under overpasses and in dank rat-infested subway tunnels, asking his whereabouts to people slowly nodding out. I dialed emergency rooms, often being hung up on. No time to deal with that, but he was my brother, a kind man with deep problems. I'm not that much better in reality. Look like my mother, live more like my father, a relation by blood kind of tainted. Kill the pain you can't deal with a syringe and a bottle. Live on the outskirts of humanity. My wits are spent, emotions dried out. The traffic in the city wishing by couldn't care less about the loss of another lost soul. Just another cold day living in a heartless metropolis. That was kind of sad.
That was good though, man. Oh, it's really good. I like your stuff.
Thank
really
you. Do you write something sometimes and have any idea? Like I have no idea. Sometimes I know where something comes from. Like that one, I don't know. Like sometimes I write something, I'm really sure where that came from. I didn't set out to specifically do it, you know?
Yeah, well, it's funny that reading that reminded me that first poem that I wrote, going back to that teenage bedroom with the Beatles poster, was actually this poem about River Phoenix, who had passed away maybe a year or so before.
Wow.
And he was somebody that like, wasn't even like a childhood or like a teenage girl crush or anything, but I thought he was like so cool because like I would read about him in like Sassy magazine, and he was a vegetarian, and he played in a band, and even though he was an actor, like he was playing in these little like dive bars in Florida and stuff, and that was at the time such a rare, like unknown world to me. I didn't know you could do such a thing, and it just seemed like everything he was doing was really cool, and like I wanted to do that, and I did, and I'm a vegetarian, and I played in dive bars.
Okay.
But I didn't even realize it was sometime after he had passed, and when I wrote the poem, it was like it just sort of came out in this like, you know, rush of, you know, of just like, whoa, where did that come from? It kind of freaked me out. But I almost was like tingly afterwards of like, whoa, like that. I didn't even realize I was sitting on a lot of like psychic discord.
Right.
and it had to go somewhere.
Uh-huh.
And it came out in this poem, and it wasn't even like a day out. It was like a year after he had passed away. But
Right.
it's just but it still happens to me as an adult that sometimes there's something, a friend that's passed away, or an incident that's occurred, or just even something I've witnessed on TV, or something that has gotten to me in a particular way.
Right.
That I don't fully realize until something gets tweaked and I sit down to write the poem,
Right.
and then
it comes out.
Yeah,
Right.
and
you might not have realized how deep it was there.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a real it's a mystery, but
Right.
but it is, I think it's there's something kind of therapeutic in there, and that's why I was teaching writing for a little while, and I would just try to encourage my students, just get at that feeling. It was I was so cocky because when I went in to teach, I was teaching like prose amp. It was just like an intro to creative writing kind of class. And I thought, teaching poetry is going to be so easy because I'm going to all these readings and I write all these poems all the time. And,
Right.
I'll just give them some of my favorite poems and
Right.
let her rip, kids.
Right.
And I'm like, no, it's so hard because to me, it's like, you can make somebody write a sonnet or say, okay, this week we're going to learn what a sestina is and write one, or follow the form, kind of thing is so easy. But to get at a poem that gets at what you're trying to get at and
Mm-hmm.
it gets it across and has that feeling and makes you go, whoa, at the end.
Right.
It's like, it's so hard to it's like I can't make you have that feeling, and
No.
put it on the page.
No, of course not.
But I think the best you can do sometimes is just like expose people or expose yourself. Like if you're listening to this right now and you are like, I feel like I have this urge to be a poet and I don't really know how to do it. Just, read. Like
Mm-hmm.
you got to have input for the output,
Sure.
just like read,
Right.
but like, just start trying to work it out,
Right.
and you can go from like writing just little phrases in a notebook to then like it becomes a full-fledged poem to
Right.
then like write another one, like
Right.
see what happens when you and kind of get in this like trance-like state of like let your mind like let it flow, and just see where it takes you.
I mean, when I first started, like I said, I didn't write as a young person except 2 punk songs.
You got to start somewhere.
In the 80s.
Yeah.
I guess when I would write, I always thought it was really terrible. But then I used writing, like whatever it was, 7 or 8 years ago, as therapy, like you said. And it was really trying to handle a situation that was difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized I liked the process. And I could tell stories, and it could be about my life or a part of my life. Or I could make it about just there's all these lives out there, other people's lives.
Yeah.
Like something like this is not really my life, although there are sometimes little things from my life in it, and then I make it a story, and I make a story about somebody else, or just look at the world around you, and I realized the process is fun,
Yeah.
And
That surprises me because I thought you were going to tell me that poem is like from a deep personal.
No,
like that's.
I mean, there's elements of it
that feels really like.
There are elements of it that could be personal, but right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I like to also write about the people that don't have a voice too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's the thing too. It's the connector. You want to like reach out.
Because humanity is not just we're talking about like the Beatles. I mean, that's humanity. That's one part of a creative humanity. But there's a whole world out there of people struggling, and that's also humanity. And sometimes we overlook it,
Yeah.
And it could be mental illness. It could be drug addiction. It could be poverty. It could be war. It could be, there's all these human things that are happening that are difficult for, and.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's the thing. It's like grappling with big emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that's kind of like the magic of poetry and poetic language. It's like poetry, nobody gets paid for it. And yet it resonates across the decades. And we need it. There's something that like we need it, and just even music, like if you want to say like songs or poetry, it's like there's people that, that don't have the ways and means, but are writing still, or trying to put down their experiences on paper in some language that's elevated from just our everyday typical, like, hey Bob, how was your weekend?
Exactly.
Kind of
something
patter that doesn't get anything across, even though it's just sort of the currency of the conversational currency or whatever in the office or wherever you are. It's like we all want something that digs a little deeper and hits us in our feelings and makes you go, oh.
So speaking of that, we definitely need at least for you to read one more. We're getting kind of towards the end of the show, and then we'll talk about what's next for you. And we should also talk a little bit about the Pink Pony series because I'm interested in that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Finding out about that.
All right. Well, I'll read. Yeah. Well, since we're talking about, let me see. So we're kind of talking about like grief and whatnot. So this.
I do find it's easier to write about difficult, like pain and stuff.
I know, it's like it's so hard to write when you're like happy, but
I know.
But yeah, it's like, well, because there's no conflict in happiness. It's
right.
like, oh, everything's working. Like when you're unhappy, there's conflict. It's like I want one thing, but the actual situation differs from what I want. Right. So therefore, unhappiness. Yeah. I'm gonna write about it. All right, this is speaking of difficult things, so this is called Farewell Issue. I don't want to buy any more memorial magazines commemorating, I can't even spell commemorating, you and your life which is ended. And then I turn to this book and write until the ink is dead too, until I'm just trawling horrible inkless trenches into the page. These dumb ghost lines are like you are, an impression, something weighty and insistent was here, but we can't quite make it out now. Find a pencil, shade it in, conjure up a ghost. I don't like this, I don't feel anything. For a while there, I felt everything. I don't know if that was better. I cried in the street, in the post office line. I stay up now till dawn refreshing your name on the internet. They call this searching behavior. Nothing breaks my concentration. I'm commemorating. I'm learning how to spell commemorate. I'm twisting toward the sunlight like a half-alive vine. The sunlight's artificial. I sit with my silence in the rain. I don't know what to talk about with people. My concentration is utterly broken. There's a chorus of bright lights and kind words and chasms of dark things I can't seem to cross over or even understand. But I keep dredging deeper into this page as if I could press the words in deep enough, as if I could tattoo your ashes back to life, as if I could write and write until time spun backwards and our pages were blank and the ending was beautifully unwritten.
Nice. Very powerful. Inspiration?
Well, that was, I mean, you talk about like seeing people or other things that bring up another thing. It was written about losing a friend who passed away.
Right,
but
I figured that. Yeah.
But I kind of also, it was written after I can't remember where I was. I might have been standing on the subway platform, but I saw these like magazines. It was after Carrie Fisher had passed away, and it was just all like Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds. And I was thinking, and it just was like, just so tired of like people that I love passing away.
Right. It's a difficult feeling.
It was like, it just seemed like it was like written at a time. When did I write this? And I don't know. It was after kind of losing a friend and sort of just grafting those two feelings of like, here's an artist that I really liked. It's like she's one of my favorite writers, and then a friend that I had lost prior to that, and just kind of like say like all of it. It was just like, oh man. Just that 2016 like death wave. That's like
that was crazy.
David Bowie and Prince. And,
I know.
Gary Shandling.
There was over 20
just like, and it was like a lot of people that I had sort of like looked up to in my childhood or in my teenagehood or in my grown-uphood or whatever as artists that I really like. I was like a huge.
So you wrote in 2016.
Wrote in 2017.
Oh, I
actually.
see.
I just have the date on there.
I see.
But yeah, it was just kind of like afterwards. It just something. Yeah, just seeing all this like wave of magazines. I was just like, oh God, like I don't want to see any of this anymore.
Right. And your friend on top of it.
Yeah, and then like a friend of mine had passed away in 2016 as well, and so my friend Michelle, that I from Jersey Shore, and we'd seen a lot of music together and stuff like that.
Right.
And so it was just kind of having that in the back of my mind. And again, it was like something that was in the back of my mind that didn't kind of find its way out till later.
Right. But it found its way out beautifully.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the hope, is that you can take your misery and turn it into again, to quote Carrie Fisher, take your broken heart and turn it into art, to make a rhyme. But yeah, like that's the goal, is like to find something in the darkness and the churn of sort of human struggle that is beautiful, and that is the love that we have for one another that informs our grief or whatever. Right. To get at that rather than just not having any place to go with it.
Right, exactly. So, anyway. So tell me about the Pink Pony reading series.
Oh, well, the Pink Pony was great. It was, and that was what got me out. And it was actually like in the late 90s, I was part of a a Patti Smith fan group. This was like pre-social media. It was a listserv. So it was like you would get get like emails. Right. And I don't even know how I found this, but in the sort of proto-internet of the 90s. And I got on it, and I'm on there, cut to like 98, 99. I was visiting here, and I went to a poetry reading at St. Mark's Church, because like that was the place I'd read about in books that you'd come to for a poetry reading. Right. And somebody was passing out these broadsheets, and one of the poets on there was Jackie Sheeler, whose name I recognized from this Patti Smith listserv. Wow. So the next time her name popped up, I was like, I know this name from somewhere. And the next time her name popped up in the emails, I emailed her privately, and I was like, hey, are you the Jackie Sheeler that wrote this poem that I read at St. Mark's Church in this broadside thing? Yeah. And she was like, yeah, that's me. And she said, I run this reading series, and if you're ever in New York again, like, come to my reading series. It's at the Pink Pony, which I think was here on Ludlow Street originally. Okay. It was like a little restaurant. Uh-huh. And so it was called the Pink Pony poetry reading series or whatever, because it was at the Pink Pony.
Exactly.
But they lost the space. It was her and her partner Maggie Balistreri were running it, and they lost the space and ended up moving to Cornelia Street Cafe, where it was for years, and then Cat George and Peter Karloftis ended up taking it over, if you've met them, from Three Rooms Press. And now, of course,
I have met them, yes.
Yeah, sadly, Cornelia Street Cafe is closed, but for like almost 2 decades or something, that was like a really rollicking reading. Yeah. And and it was just, so when I did move to New York after college, and I was sort of floating around and looking for a way to make something of my art every day, I came to Jackie's poetry reading. Nice. And I went to a couple of other readings, and I just couldn't like fit it. Like, I was not a slam poet. Right. And that was kind of the vibe at the time, was the whole Nuyorican. Sure. Right. Which I, total respect to slam poets. Right. It's such a hard thing, but that's just not my...
Yeah, you could admire something and know that you're not going to be good at it.
I could not,
you can't put yourself in a place.
Have that, aggressive, thing, Right. And so I just felt like I couldn't get a foothold in that kind of scene, and but Pink Pony was just that was the vibe. That was to me, it was just a good mixture of people, ages, races, genders, every, different walks of life, and they would have great features, but then a great open mic too. And I just that was my poetry school. Cool. I feel like I learned so much there.
Yeah, that's definitely a school.
Yeah, and just learning, what works and what doesn't work right in front of people in real time. It was just such an education. And so, and so many of my friends, and Trina that I started the band with, I met there, and one of my friends, John Proctor, who haven't seen him. John, if you're listening to this, come to a reading. He's he's living up in Westchester now. But he's he's a writer and became one of my best friends. And so some people that I'm still friends with, and poets that I know all these years now.
That sounds like a great memory.
Yeah. It's just, it was such a great time, and I'm sure many more of your podcast guests can wax rapsodic about that.
So talking about features and readings, anything coming up for you that people should look out for? And how else can people find you and your poetry?
I don't have anything coming up. Sorry, you can just, I don't know, call me and we'll have a coffee or something. But no, you can find me on the usual social media. I'm not on Twitter that much anymore, but I have a Twitter. It's at Meagan Brothers, and Instagram, I'm trying to kind of move over to that. And on Instagram, I'm at with 2 E's, the Meagan Brothers. So because Meagan Brothers was already taken by some other
Meagan Brothers,
some other Meagan Brothers, out in. I wonder if she's also named after Blood, Sweat, and Tears. But so you can find me. I'm around and about. But yeah, I don't know. Drop me a line, say hello. Don't be weird.
So besides being here, I want to, if you don't mind, I'm going to plug something else. I'm doing it.
Plug away.
So next Saturday, the 14th. I'm doing my first, hopefully will not be the last, variety show. Cool. It's called the Very Swell Variety Show, and it's Saturday, October 14th at Young Ethel's in Park Slope on 5th between 12th and 13th. It's a really cool bar. It's a nice room in the back, and there's going to be a storyteller, a couple of musicians. There's going to be a couple of musical performances, a couple of poets, and my group, the Bitter Pill Collective. And if we get a good turnout, I hope to do it maybe bi-monthly or something like that.
Nice.
And have a mix of talent, You know.
That sounds really
although I was
awesome.
told we were not allowed to have any fire eaters, so that's out. So don't ask me if you can do the variety show if you're a fire eater.
Leave the batons at
Right,
home, fire
yes.
eaters. You're sadly.
So I loved this. It was really, we introduced it correctly. I think this was the best podcast ever.
That's it.
So-
We're done. Pack your bags, Mark Maron.
Yes.
It's all over.
Yes.
Well, thank you for having me, Pete.
Thank you
This
so much
was-
for being on the show.
This is super fun.
Oops, I hit play and it didn't play.
That's always the way.
What's going on here? Come on.
We could
The
just-
theme song.
We can make up a theme song.
And the theme is played by Fredo Genziano,
Nice.
who works with me, and he'll be here Monday night at Wayne Crawl's first floor walk-up and at the Young Ethel's. Meagan Brothers, again, thanks so much for being on my podcast. It was a lot of fun talking to you.
Thank you for having me. This was
And,
a lot of fun being here.
I don't remember if I said it because I always do, but I should. It's Storytelling on Orchard Street, and it's 180 Orchard Street, and it's in the P&T Knitwear bookstore. It's a great bookstore. And besides Wayne's event every other Monday, they have other great events here, reading series, all types of things. And there's a cafe in the back, so you can get a beverage also. So again, thanks to everybody who is listening or watching this, and we'll see you some other time.